Hello, my name is Greg Simpson. I'm the minister at St. Andrew's United Church in Chatham, Ontario, and I'm putting this presentation together for St. Andrew's College, part of the University of Saskatchewan. We're going to talk a little bit about streaming video and how ministers can maybe prepare themselves to look at a camera instead of looking at people in a congregation, or maybe even figure out how to balance between having a camera and people together. So a little bit of background, I am a minister, as I said, in the United Church of Canada. I was actually a software developer before that, and so I've kind of lived a little bit of the technology side of this. So when it came time for me to look down the lens of a camera, I was at least comfortable with the technology, even if I wasn't super comfortable with a lens. Now, I have not ever had opportunity to be a film star before, and so it was a little bit weird, though I have done a little bit of audio recording, some podcasts, some voiceover work. And so the idea of hearing myself back, that was already something that I had some experience with. And let me reassure you, almost everybody finds it really weird to hear their own voice, and it's really uncomfortable to see your own picture on a camera or your own video on a camera. That being said, I'm going to tell you, you've got to do it. You've got to watch and you've got to listen, even if only just to make sure that the quality of the video is coming through okay. So I've got a few tips, things that I've learned along the way, some hurdles that I've had to jump over, some pitfalls that maybe I fell into, and hopefully some of these things can help you as well. The first one I'm going to talk about is something that we as ministers have to somewhat unlearn. I know that part of my experience as a minister and part of what I like to do as part of the stage, and see, I'm doing it right there, is I use lots of body expression. And lots of seminaries, lots of universities, as they're teaching ministers, will talk about being very expressive and using large hand movements because, especially if you're in a big congregation or there are a lot of people in the room, you might be some distance from somebody. And so kind of like stage actors have to somewhat overemphasize things so that people can pick up on the emotion and can pick up on the body language. Well, if you're this close to a camera, you've got to shut all that down because these sorts of motions, you can see my hands go right outside the camera. They're off frame. It's not going to make a difference. And if I'm talking with my hands all the time, it becomes very distracting. So we do have to ratchet this back a little bit, and I'll admit that has taken me quite a bit of work. Now, at the same time as backing off some of the big body expressions, what you do have to do is actually add to some of the facial expressions. You have to be more conscious of making sure that the emotion that you're trying to portray shows on your face. Now, if you're used to being on a chancel or behind a pulpit in a large church, people at the back of the room can barely see your eyebrows. So they're not really picking up on that. But the camera, it sees everything. And especially if it's only this far away. And so it took me a little while to back off some of my physical expressions and add to some of the facial expressions. And it doesn't come automatically, and it can quite easily be uncomfortable, and in fact, a little bit weird. I have been told for my whole life that I have very expressive eyebrows. In fact, one of them, it's more expressive. I don't know. We can't get them to work together. But I have had to do some work to make sure that I didn't come across comical or trying to push emotions. So that's something that you can only do by practicing. Practicing into a mirror helps, but the real hard part is to practice in front of a camera and then watch it and then be critical. But I will recommend that you watch it with somebody who you know and love and trust so that they can temper some of your own critical thoughts, because I don't know about you, but I'm very often my own worst critic. And so getting somebody who will be helpful but be positive was helpful for me. When we first went to online only, we only were able to use my my phone as our device to stream. And it was actually my own kid who was holding that right up fairly close. Another member of the church created this kind of cool rig that was able to give a little bit better structure to hold on to the phone. But as he was shooting, then afterwards he would let me know Sometimes positively, sometimes as only kids can do. Teenagers, am I right? But he would kind of give me some feedback, and the bulk of it was really, really positive. I definitely had to step outside of my own self and say, who are you to tell me? But it was really, really helpful to have my own kid, who I love and trust, give me that bit of feedback. So that was really, really helpful for me. Finding somebody who you can trust, who will give you that feedback, can be really super helpful. Now, another part, which I never really thought about, and it depends on your situation. If you are preaching and you're wearing an alb every time, or you're wearing some sort of a gown and that's what you're used to, then this might not impact you in the same way. But what I did learn is wearing really small print can be really problematic, especially when the cameras are quite some distance away and zoomed in. And even more especially if they're zoomed using something called digital zoom rather than optical zoom. Small patterns, especially lines, small lines, either vertical or horizontal, can do some really weird things, and they make some really weird effects. Now, I don't have many striped shirts, but I'm a big fan of paisley. You might notice that there's a little paisley right here. I love my paisley shirts, and in general, I've had to stop wearing them for regular Sundays because the really fine pattern doesn't portray well when a camera is far away. Never would have guessed that. Now, I'm not saying you have to go and throw out half your wardrobe. Might not be an issue for you, but it's something to be aware of, something to pay attention to. Now, the other part that I've really had to learn to change, now, and this is slightly different on a Sunday morning from when I'm doing this sort of thing, like a one-on-one or just a direct-to-camera, is I've had to sort of change some of the way I choose words or the way that I structure a conversation. Now, my preaching style is already fairly conversational. I preach without notes, and that certainly isn't right for everybody. Some of the best preachers I know work from full manuscripts, and I cannot touch them with a 10-foot pole as far as their preaching capability. But even people who are preaching from notes often find that for doing something to a camera like this, they need to write it slightly more conversational. Especially if you're sharing something on YouTube, or if you're going to be sharing it in a social media situation, the type of conversation that you share on a Sunday morning, if it's not obvious that you're still preaching from a pulpit, it doesn't really land the same way. And people are expecting something different. They're expecting something slightly more vulnerable, slightly more conversational. And so you might actually have to modify the way you write. One suggestion that I've given, if I've done some interviews with people, whether it's at the church or that sort of thing, and the suggestion that I give to them is just kind of forget the cameras there, which of course you can't do, but get into that mindset, and treat it as if you and I are chatting while we're leaned against the mantle of a fireplace. Or maybe you're an outdoor sort of person, you're leaned up against a fence, having a chat while there's some cattle over there. I'm not sure what it looks like, but try to think like you are sharing a conversation with another person, just one person, somebody who's a good friend. Put it into that context rather than trying to think about, oh, well, on the other side of this camera, there could be one person or there could be 50 people, or maybe this video goes viral and 5 million people watch it. You need to step away from that mindset and think more conversationally. And so some people who I follow, especially some of the YouTubers who will talk about this, they will often, in their script, they will even write little connective words like, now when I talk about blah, 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 or, and they'll write that in. Now, if you are a person who preaches from a full script or feels most comfortable with a full script, and you're going to do this sort of thing a lot, you might want to invest in a teleprompter. Now, that sounds like a big, scary piece of equipment that's only available to TV stations, but that's simply untrue. If you have a tablet or even a large format phone, you can get some very small, it's basically just a piece of glass that would sit right here. The camera shoots through the angled glass, and then you can see the words that are being reflected from the tablet. It's deceptively simple, and you can find apps for very little money, and then this little piece of equipment, I think we're talking for under $100. And there are many, many people who feel much more comfortable because then they're reading the words that are coming by. And it gives them a chance to kind of relax, let that stress out of your shoulders, step back into it, and just be so that you can share conversationally. So those are a few tips. They might not all apply to you. You might not be doing single to camera things. You might only be streaming during a Sunday service, but it it helps to bear that in mind, that the way people are receiving your message, if you're sharing online, if you're sharing through streaming, it's a little different, and they are expecting, or they feel different than if they're sitting in a pew on Sunday morning listening to you. I hope some of those tips help. I would be more than happy to get deeper into any one of them, or have a conversation with you, or we can have some emails back and forth. If you'd like to reach out, my email address, that's the easiest way to get me, is pastorgreg18, pastorgreg18 @gmail.com. And I'd be more than happy to share any of the little things that I've stumbled into. And yeah, it would be great to get to know you a little bit better and answer some of the questions that are more specific to your needs. Thanks so much for following along and listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.